This is The Arm of the Starfish by Madeleine Langle, Chapter 13. Adam, Polly, and Charles stood at the hitching post while Joshua and Dr. O'Keefe checked the plane. When all was in readiness, Joshua climbed into the cockpit. As the motor coughed and the propeller began to spin, making the little plane vibrate as though it must fall apart. The doctor came and stood beside the horses, a little away from Adam and the children. The plane wheeled and moved slowly across the sand, gathered speed, bounced once or twice, and then began to climb. "Sir," Adam asked, "is that plane really safe?" The doctor laughed. "Doesn't look like it, does it? But yes, as safe as the latest jet, particularly with Joshua piloting it." They watched the plane as it gained altitude, flying. It seemed, from where they stood, directly along the path of moonlight on water, flying further, higher, smaller, until it lost the reality of being an elderly, battered Hawker Hurricane piloted by a young man, and became a silver bird in the night, flying to the moon. Standing beside Adam, Polly let out a low, startled cry. "Charles, don't!" Adam turned and saw in the moonlight that Charles's face was contorted in vain effort at control, that tears were silently squeezing out of the tightly closed eyes and down the little boy's cheeks. Dr. O'Keefe knelt on the sand in order to bring himself to the child's level. "Charles." Without opening his eyes, Charles moved into his father's arms. Polly stamped. "I hate it when Charles cries." "Charles," Dr. O'Keefe said again. Polly whispered fiercely, "He never cries unless—" Adam asked, "Unless what?" "Unless something is awfully wrong." Charles stood, leaning against his father, still crying silently. Finally he said in so low a voice that Adam could hardly catch the words, "I wish Josh hadn't gone." Dr. O'Keefe's voice was quiet. "He'll be back in Lisbon almost as soon as we've had time to ride home. He has a good tailwind and the weather is clear all the way." "Will he call when he gets back?" "He always does, and I will come in to you and tell you. I promise. He has no important papers on him this time. I have to correlate and code everything he brought me. Come now, Charles, it's late and you're tired and we must go. You'll ride with me." Obediently, Charles mounted his pony. Dr. O'Keefe and the little boy led the way, Joshua's horse ambling along just behind them, with Polly and Adam in the rear. They did little talking. Polly was frowning, seeming unduly disturbed, Adam thought, by her brother's behavior. After a while she began to droop in the saddle, saying, "I'm half asleep. Pick me up if I fall off." Ahead of them, both Dr. O'Keefe and Charles sat straight and still and somehow stern. The moon moved across the sky. As they neared the bungalows, Adam saw that someone was standing on the sea wall, waiting, and for a moment fear leaped into his throat. But Dr. O'Keefe raised his arm in greeting. "It's Jose, Maria's husband," Polly said. "He takes care of the horses." They went directly to bed. As Adam drifted into sleep, he heard the phone ring, and then he heard Dr. O'Keefe pause outside Charles' door. "That was Josh, Charles. All's well. Go to sleep now." In the morning, Adam was wakened by Polly coming in with a breakfast tray. His room was flooded with light and warmth, and he felt a sense of pure well-being he had been afraid would never return. "Sit up, lazy," Polly said. "I let you sleep as long as possible. I'm not spoiling you. Breakfast in bed is one thing we always do. I'm going to take Charles his tray, and then I'm coming back to talk to you." Adam grinned at her. "Okay. Forewarned is, I hope, forewarned, though I only have two." Polly turned at the door. And the Starfish has 5. You will have exactly time to wash your face and stuff, if you hurry." She made a quick exit, and Adam heard her say, "Move, Sandy." "Does your mother know you're bothering Adam?" "She said I could ask him." and he said it was okay. Their voices continued in friendly argument as they went into the living room. Polly returned, saying, "Daddy's out in the lab. You're to go out as soon as you're ready. Then I'll come for you in a little before lunch and we'll go for a swim." Adam poured hot milk, hot coffee. "Will we see what's her name?" "Macrina? Yes, if she comes." "Doesn't she always?" "Usually, but not always. Then, after lunch, we'll take you to the village." "What village?" Polly sat cross-legged on the foot of Adam's bed, the native village, where Maria and Jose come from. Adam said, rather uncomfortably, his mouth full of croissant, "I don't have to be taken sightseeing, Polly. I've caused enough trouble for all of you already. I'd really rather stay in the lab and work." Polly frowned, then gave him a stern and piercing look. "It's not sightseeing, Adam. I assure you, that's not our purpose in taking you there." "Are you going too?" "If Daddy'll let me. He usually does." She got down off the bed. "Okay, I'll come over to the lab and yell for you when it's time for our swim." When Adam went out to the lab, Dr. O'Keefe was sitting at the roll-top desk, writing. But he looked up at the boy's step, saying without preamble, "I want to show you something." He took Adam into the small side lab and to the first of the tanks. In it was a starfish in the process of regeneration. It was not a starfish with part of its own central disk. It was an isolated fragment of arm into which, Dr. O'Keefe told Adam, he had transplanted nerve rings, as he had done with the starfish the boy had already seen. The difference between the starfish in this tank and those in the main lab was that this starfish was not developing normally. This particular combination of arm and nerve ring seemed to be generating into a strange, lumpy, three-armed creature. Without speaking, Dr. O'Keefe moved to the second tank. Here was a lizard who had lost a leg. Something was growing where the leg had been. It was not a lizard leg, but a deformed stump. In the third tank was a frog who had lost a forearm. This, too, was growing back abnormally. Dr. O'Keefe went into the main lab, sitting down at his desk. Adam stood, waiting. For some time, Dr. O'Keefe appeared to study a pencil. Finally, he said, "Back in the early 60s, scientists were able to start babies, actual human fetuses, in a test tube. For a while, they developed normally. Then, no one knew why, their development went awry. They became disformed monstrosities. You've probably heard about this." "Yes, sir." "Why did this happen?" "I don't know, sir. I don't think anybody does." "Why is regeneration a normal thing for starfish? Why, if we transplant nerve rings from the central disc on an isolated arm fragment, then organize itself? Why is this also true of frogs and lizards? Well, it's because the augmented nerve supply provides the stimulation. Why were the animals in the little lab developing abnormally?" "I don't know, sir. Mutations?" "In a very small percentage, yes, but usually no. Where do you think I get my experimental animals from, Adam?" "Well, the beach, from around here. I used to collect specimens for old Doc." "Yes, the children find a good many for me. They bring me any animal they see, marine or land, that has been injured. The villagers bring me some too, for which I pay them 1 escudo for 25 specimens. I made it absolutely clear that they were to bring me only the animals that have been accidentally hurt. Then, after the first abnormalities began to develop, I learned that 2 of the men who work at the resort hotel had been deliberately mutilating the creatures. I had thought that the smallness of the payment would avoid this, an escudo being 3.5 cents, you will remember. But it didn't. There always have been and there always will be people who have been corrupted into enjoying any excuse for cruelty." For some reason, Adam thought of the cutter's chauffeur. He could quite easily imagine Molech tearing the arm off a lizard. Dr. O'Keefe continued, It is from these deliberately mutilated animals that the deformities have come. But it isn't even that simple. I had, for a brief while, a lab assistant who was a brilliant man. He was also one of the most evil human beings I had ever encountered. Every animal he tended, every starfish arm into which he transplanted nerve rings, every frog or lizard into whose wounds he injected augmented nerve supply, developed malformations that were malignant and that devoured the creature on which they grew. Why? Adam asked. Why was he evil? You remember the story of the third man? Yes, Josh mentioned it. Antibiotics diluted and sold on the black market, and innocent children suffering and dying through this incomprehensible greed. This kind of thing doesn't happen only in fiction. You don't have to read the book or see the movie to come across it. This man, with a brilliant and utterly warped mind, grew fat on underworld black market corruption. Then why did you employ him, sir? I was asked to, in order to convict him. Did you? With Joshua's help. What happened? He's in Leavenworth. Adam said slowly, So I guess this kind of thing makes enemies. Dr. O'Keefe looked at him. They are enemies, Adam. You don't have to make enemies of them. Adam got his stubborn look. What about Polly? Dr. O'Keefe did not answer, and Adam continued. If you didn't make enemies, I mean, even if they are enemies anyhow, then would anybody have wanted to hurt Polly? The older man's face tightened. Nothing is easy, Adam. Nothing. And we're all of us in danger from the moment we're born. You've grown up in New York. You know how to cross a street. You know that if you cross a street, a truck can run you down. If you ride in the subway and there's a spot of trouble, a bullet meant for someone else can find its way into your heart. And if my research, which I had anticipated as a quiet and hermit-like life, so that I could bring up my children in a peaceful and natural way in the midst of an unpeaceful and unnatural world, has, instead, led them into added dangers, then I must accept this for them, as well as for myself, if I believe in what I am doing. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean... It's all right. I just want you to understand clearly why it is so important that what I am doing does not get into the wrong hands. Remember the deformed babies that came out of the thalidomide being used before enough was known about it? We're just at the beginning of this, and it cannot be taken out of our hands and misused. It's like what you said about the storm. Yes, like splitting the atom. We're just beginning to learn why regeneration is sometimes abnormal and malignant. We're just beginning to understand that you cannot change stones into bread. This is not the way miracles are worked, but it's always a temptation. If what we are doing is taken over by the unscrupulous, it can cause unimaginable horror and suffering. Here is power to give life to people, or to devour them. What I am trying to do is to go back about 2,000 years in my thinking. Somewhere in the last 2,000 years, we've gone off. When we began to depend on and develop things in the Western world, we lost something of inestimable value in our understanding. There's something wrong about trying to heal with a surgeon's knife. There's got to be an alternative to cutting and mutilating, and I'm trying to learn it from the starfish. But I'm just at the beginning, and I'm afraid, Adam. If it gets out of my hands, I'm afraid. Dr. O'Keefe clenched his fist and pounded it softly against the papers on his desk. Then he smiled. All right, Adam, I have work to do here at my desk. You get along with your job until Polly comes to take you for a swim. It was several minutes before Adam could concentrate on his care of the tanks, but as he began to put the day's observations down in the files, the discipline of the work took hold of him, and he was able to keep his mind on the job at hand. This was a task that fascinated him, that engrossed him utterly, and he was surprised when he heard Polly's voice and realized that the morning had passed. Polly stood in the lab, wearing a black two-piece bathing suit that did nothing for her still undeveloped figure. "Daddy," she asked, "what are the specifications for a fashion model?" "Oh, 34, 22, 34." Dr. O'Keefe replied absently. Polly sighed. "Oh dear, I'm 20, 20, 20." Her father laughed. "I really think you look better in the red wool, even if it does fight with your hair." Polly sighed again. "Yes, okay, I'll change, while Adam gets into his trunks." "Mother says time will take care of this particular problem, and I suppose it will. Was Mother gorgeous when she was my age?" "Frightful," Dr. O'Keefe said. "Much worse than you." "That's encouraging, at any rate. And I suppose it's a good thing about time, because right now I have an awful time choosing between Adam and Joshua, even if Josh is too old for me." Her father laughed again. It was a good laugh, warm and open and loving. "Time seems to be making its inroads already. A few weeks ago you were announcing that you were never going to grow up." "Oh, I'm over being Peter Pan. Maybe it's jealousy, knowing that Callie has got her hooks into Adam. Come on, Adam, let's go. I told Maria I'd be back in time to help serve lunch." It was another golden day. The sand was gold. Gold shimmered from the sun into the blue of the sky, touched the small crests of waves in the calm ocean. Adam and Polly swam out side by side until Polly stopped and began to tread water, making the strange, breathy, whistling noise that was her call to the dolphin. It was longer this time. Polly's calling began to sound tired, and Adam had given up and was just about to suggest swimming back, when Silver arched out of the water in a swift flash, and Macrina came leaping, diving, flying to meet them. Again there was the ecstatic greeting. Polly with her arms about the great slippery beast, Macrina giving her marvelous, contagious dolphin smile, so that Adam felt that he was grinning like a fool. After a while, Macrina left Polly, came over to Adam, and gave him a gentle, inquisitive nudge. For a moment he was frightened. He knew that dolphins were friendly and gentle, that sailors rejoiced at seeing them because they kept away sharks. But Macrina was so large, so alien, that it was all he could do to make himself keep treading water quietly, and to say, "Hello, Macrina." Macrina nudged him again, then flashed out of the water, dove, disappeared, and came up on Polly's other side. "She likes you," Polly cried joyfully. "Macrina, show Adam your flipper." As she had done the day before, Macrina obediently rolled over and waved her sleek, wet flipper. At last Adam realized. "The flipper," he said. "Did she—" Stroking Macrina, Polly nodded. "Yes. We don't know how it happened. I found her on the beach, flipper torn off, bleeding to death. I ran and got Daddy, and he was able to stop the bleeding. Of course, we didn't know her then, but she seemed to know that Daddy and I wanted to help. Daddy has some big tanks in the village. They're not in a building. The village is around a cove, and there are some pens in the cove. Luckily, Father Tom was here, and he helped, and we managed to get her to the village and into one of the pens. Daddy and Father Tom stayed with her all night. As a matter of fact, we could hardly get Daddy away for weeks. He ate there with Verbius. He's their chief. And I guess you'd call him their medicine man, too. He's 149 years old. And he prayed over Macrina, and it all worked. And the augmented nerve and stuff. And isn't she marvelous and good and beautiful and virtuous and wonderful?" Macrina rolled over in the water and smirked. "Okay, Macrina," Polly said, "we've got to go into lunch now. I promised Maria. Give my love to Basil and Gregory." "Basil and Gregory?" "Her brothers. They're very intelligent. Of course dolphins are, but we think Macrina's family is more so. It's quite obvious they are, isn't it?" Macrina waited for no further goodbyes. Down, down she dove. Then, 100 yards away, Adam saw her flash through the air. "By the way," Polly said, "while you were in the lab, that Callie's father called and talked to Mother. They're sending the hotel helicopter for you at 7:30. I don't know why Daddy wants you to go there for dinner. I think it's just awful. But I suppose if he wants you to go, you'll have to go." "Yes." The pleasure ebbed from Adam's limbs. If he wants me to, I have to. Polly stopped treading water, rolled over onto her back, blew a jet of water upward like a small whale, and floated. Promise me one thing. What? Don't go without saying goodbye to me. I have something to give you, and you mustn't leave without it. Promise? Okay, Adam agreed. I promise. What is it? A charm? No, Polly said. A weapon.